Well, good morning, fellow constitutionalists, and welcome to the Free-4-All-Friday edition of the Dan Clements Show, a Christian political talk show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior fighting for your right just to be an American. It is March 2nd in the year of our Lord 2018. Remember, we're a hyphen-free, PC-free zone. God is still in control. He does love you. And I'm broadcasting live from the Hemlock Studios here in the snowy central Susquehanna Valley in the great Keystone State. It was snowing out earlier, no accumulation. We're supposed to be in the cycling. Could have wind gusts up to 45 mile an hour this afternoon. So we've sort of battened down the hatches here at the Hemlock Studio and are staying indoors for the rest of the day. Not that I like to venture outdoors on these days like this, but I did go to therapy this morning. Now, before I get the show started here, I want to give a shout out to one of my best friends in the world, Dave, down in Tennessee. He went through, I consider it to be a serious operation. Last night at 11:30 or something, he texted me and said they had him up and tried to walk him and stuff. And so he wasn't able to do that very long, but hopefully today, I haven't heard an update yet today. I'll get it probably after the show. But my prayer is that he has a speedy recovery and that the operation fixed what it was supposed to fix in Dave. So Dave, this is for you. I know you listen to the show. My prayers go out to you, and I know all the listeners and anybody that tunes into the show, but send out their best wishes and prayers to you also. All right. Hopefully, I'm hoping that the audio on the show is actually sounding a lot better than it was. I worked very hard this past week on setting up sound gates and everything on OBS, which I didn't know they had. I was doing a lot of research to try to keep some of the low-end noise out. I was trying to redo my board, my soundboard, and I haven't put it back to the original setting, but I'm going to put it back to the original setting because I figured out how to take some of the low-end noise that I can't seem to filter out that comes through from the sound cards and that from the PCs I have. So hopefully that's better. The video looks very good today. I looked very good. My mustache is filling out very, very nice. I've had some good compliments from older ladies at the Y when I go to my water therapy, but I've had some good compliments on it. They think it looks kind of masculine. So that's not, that wasn't exactly what I was going for. There it is. It looks masculine. Now, my wife likes it. She says it's different, but she likes it. I talked about letting this grow out down here and braiding it and maybe putting a couple beads in it. She looked at me with those lovingly wifely eyes that most wives give to their husbands when they say something ridiculous. And I'm pretty sure that's exactly what happened. I said something ridiculous there. All right, today's show. Get into the show. I titled the show President Trump, the GOP and Gun Control. And this has been a wild week with gun control on everybody's mind. I haven't done a lot of videos this week because of all the things that were coming together on this. I figured I'd wait to talk about the main issues, and it's about gun control. This has always been about gun control every time we have a mass shooting, which Steven Crowder brought up a good point. He was in Texas, and he was talking about, he does this show, he puts a subject up, and he says, change my mind. He talked about gun control. And the students he was talking to, or the young people he was talking to, even one of the adults, not an older adult, but probably in his late 20s, early 30s adult, didn't remember what Sutherland Springs, Texas shooting was. That was, the shooter was actually stopped by or interrupted by a certified NRA instructor with another AR-15, this shooter down there, which actually caused more death, 27 deaths plus injuries. I think it was another 20 injuries. It was way bigger than the school shooting down there, but it didn't get the national attention as the school shooting did, and I find that kind of troubling. And I find it really troubling that we're supposed to listen to children who don't have the experiences in life as adults do. Now, I'm not saying that they shouldn't be speaking out. I'm not saying what they're saying should be dismissed totally out of hand, but when you sit down and reason through it and go through the points, like I did on that video, what Emma Gonzalez got wrong, or 15, I think it was 15 things what Emma Gonzalez got wrong, which is one of my most watched videos in the past 2 weeks. It's phenomenal for me, the amount of watches, comments I've had on that video. But if you sit down and use some facts, reason, logic, common sense, you'll see a lot of what these kids on CNN, that CNN's actually allowing to speak on CNN, you'll see holes in every one of their arguments. And I don't care what anybody says out there. I don't care how unscripted you think the town hall was, that you sort of side with CNN. You got to sort of control things. And especially when you don't have all the students that wanted to talk or wanted to ask questions on that panel at the town hall. You only had it, and it was a total bias on that town hall. We're not going to really talk a lot about that, but I'm setting this up. There was a total bias on that town hall. Mr. Hogg, one of the students that, there's so many conspiracy theories about him, it's not funny, until I got definite proof that he wasn't a senior or junior or whatever at the Parkland school, the Parkland, Florida school there, the major, I don't have it right at the tip of my tongue here, but you know who I'm talking about, what school I'm talking about down in Florida. A lot of what he says makes no sense. There is no policy in his remarks other than what the gun grabbers, what the anti-Second Amendment folks out there, just take all the guns. There has been so many lies talked about Australia, so much misreporting about what precipitated the Australian gun ban, gun confiscation, which is kind of funny if you look at mass shootings of that nature before, I think it was 1993 or 96, before that time and after that time. There wasn't any before, and there hasn't been any after. That was almost like a blip on the radar that came and went. So no one really can definitively say that the confiscation and the new stricter gun laws in Australia prevented more mass shootings. Matter of fact, there have been other mass shootings, and I'm using the criteria. The United States uses 4 or more. Some municipalities use 3 or more. So I'm going to go with the lesser number of 3. 3 mass shooting, and one of the shootings in Australia, there was 5 people that were shot, and that was since the gun ban. Now, I've had some people push back on that, saying, well, that was a domestic disturbance. I'm like, but people got shot. People got killed. And in all of this talk about the gun deaths in America, both sides of the argument, they want to inflate their numbers. Not so much on the right, not so much of the supporters of the Second Amendment, which, again, I've said this before, I'll say it again. The Second Amendment does not give us the right to keep and bear arms. The Second Amendment protects the right we already had prior to government. And when I say that, people just go crazy. They're like, what are you talking about? They just absolutely go crazy about that. But our rights, people in general, not just Americans, people all over the world, they have God-given inalienable rights that they have before any government was formed. Now, a lot of people can't exercise those rights because the government is so totalitarian, they won't allow them to exercise those rights, but we've had these rights before government was ever formed. So the argument here in the United States, is that we just need to do away with all guns, and then we'll have perfect harmony in the country. We won't have any more gun deaths. Well, the problem with that is, and this may be cliche, but it is a fact, that the only people who have guns will be criminals. Because there's going to be 2 classes of criminals. One, the actual gangbanger, thug criminal are going to get guns no matter what you ban, And 2, you're going to make lawbreakers out of citizens who do not want to give up their guns, who do not want to give up their right to keep and bear arms. because it's a God-given right, and you just can't legislate away God-given rights. That's why all this talk about, well, we'll just, people are saying, well, we just need to make another amendment to do away with the Second Amendment. Well, you can do away with the Second Amendment all you want. It doesn't get rid of the rights. I got in a discussion the other day, and this gentleman, he's a little younger than I am, he is of the mindset that our rights come from government, therefore can be controlled and regulated and taken away. And I said, no, that's wrong. That's, and so there's a group out there, a large group of people who believe our freedoms, our liberties, and our rights come from government. They are bestowed on us from on high by the federal government or any government. And that's just not the case. So you can't legislate away rights. Now, I can forfeit my rights because I aggressed against somebody or stole something from somebody else. That's totally different. I did something to precipitate the taking away of my rights. But for me, just sit here with my weapons in my gun cabinet, my pistol at my side, not doing anything illegal, not threatening anybody, just wanting to protect me and mine. And I pray to God that act of protection never comes. But guess what? I live by this saying, it's better to have and not need, and need and not have. So I do have personal protection here at the house, of my family and everything, in the form of, I got rifles and shotguns, and I got we got 2 pistols. And that may not be all I got. I'm just telling you about the 2 that I'm going to tell you about. So, again, that right was there before government. Now, again, there's a lot of people out there disagree with me on that point. This has been an ideology about our rights, our freedoms, our liberty are granted to us by government. And I'm very careful to not say that people should be allowed to exercise their rights, because that saying that allowed, that says, or that implies that somebody else gave us those rights to control those rights. And as far as our Christian perspective, our rights, our freedoms, our liberty are granted to us by God. And only He can actually take them away unless we do something dumb and stupid. As again, I said, that we aggress against somebody, in the form of physical violence or stealing something that they have. So watching all these just the wiggles and the wiggles and giggles of this week, especially with the governor's meeting. Now, I thought that was very productive. We're not going to talk a lot about that, but just put it in the back of your mind that there's videos out there you can watch that. I was actually watching it on One American News Network. I thought that went very well. And then President Trump had a meeting with senators, bipartisan meeting, and he said some things that I totally disagree with until he clarifies his position on it. And we'll talk about that on the show here today, about take guns first and go through due process second. I about fell off my chair when he said that, because if that were the case, and I'll get into it more, if that were the case, I think there could be a lot of abuses in that type of system in that. So, and we're just, as a side note, President Trump has been all over the landscape when it comes to our rights, as far as our right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. He's all over the place on that. He's talking about signing executive orders to get rid of bump stocks. He said, I can do that. I said, I'm thinking, no, you can't. You can't legislate that. That's an executive order legislating law. Can't do that. That's got to go through Congress. Personally, me, I don't see, and I don't want to be a hypocrite about this. I might in the future if they're still available. I don't know, just to have some fun with it. But to use it every day like a bump stock, I just don't see myself doing that. I don't think it's practical. I am from in the military. I was part of a rifle company, and I was not always. I wasn't an assistant gunner on the M60 machine gun, but even then, I still had my M16, and the only fully automatic weapon we were supposed to be using was the M60. All the riflemen were supposed to be on select fire, semi-automatic, so they control their shots and try to hit what they're aiming for instead of just spraying lead all over the place. Because even in the military, most riflemen in a rifle company could get away with a semi-automatic weapon. They really could. Now, the only reason why we have select fire and could go full, what we call, rock and roll, on the M16 is if the M60 would happen to go down, there's designated shooters, at least this is the way it was in my squad and in my platoon. There's designated shooters that switch over. They carry extra ammo just for that eventuality. But for the most part, most riflemen in a rifle company are on semi-automatic. And again, I've asked people, I must have asked a ton of people this week, they keep, oh, we got to ban assault rifles. What is your definition of assault rifle? That's what I said. Well, you go look it up. I said, no, you misunderstand me. What is your, and I put it in big, capitalized letters, bold and everything. What is your definition of an assault rifle or an assault weapon? And not a one of them has come back. Not a one of them has given me their definition. They won't even give me a definition. They just said, go look it up. I get so tired. I've been talking with this gentleman on Facebook. He's about my age. And he says all these things about President Trump, but doesn't cite any sources. And I said, please, can you give me the sources you're citing from? Well, you can go Google it. I can't find what you're talking about. Please, if you have any information, give. Well, I lived in New York City all my life. He's talking about Donald Trump and his dad being part of the KKK. Well, I've lived in New York City all my life. I know from personal experience that he's a member of the KKK and so is dad. They're racist to the core. And I'm like, and what they're doing, and this is a side note, I just want to give you the mindset of people that you deal with on a daily basis when it comes to political issues. There are literally two huge divides in politics. And he said, well, you can, the only thing I Googled about it and found about it was Donald Trump's dad in the 1920s was arrested at a KKK rally, but it was in the open street in Manhattan, and they arrested other people that were not in KKK garb that were standing there, when this rally turned into a riot. And these other people, along with Donald Trump Sr. or Donald Trump's dad, I don't know if it's a senior, were released, they were bailed out or released on their own recognizances, whatever. And so this guy he was at a KKK rally, so he's guilty by association, even though the guy may have never been a part of that. And I even asked him the question, I said, if this were true, if what you were saying was true, Bernie Sanders, the Democrat, the DNC, and Hillary Clinton would have been hollering to the rafters about this being true throughout the primaries to paint Trump as a racist. But they weren't. They were just saying he was proof. And this is the same way with, the reason why I gave that little story is, this is the same way when it comes to gun control. They want to say these things that sound nice, that appease their social justice tyrant friends. But when you press them on definitions, when you press them on exactly what do you want to happen, I have yet to have anybody answer me on that. I've actually seen people in postings that I just sort of came across that said, well, the AR in AR-15 is assault rifle. So there you go. And I was just looking over other comments from other friends. I've seen that, and I typed a reply back to them with a link to Armalite saying AR is shorthand for Armalite. The AR-15, the Armalite 15, instead of saying Armalite, they just said AR-15. And again, I don't hear any comments back from them, but I try to correct things that are factually wrong whenever I see them like that. So, all right, folks, let's get into the show here. Today's daily Bible reading comes from the book of Numbers, chapter 11, verses 16 through 17. So the Lord said to Moses, gather to me 70 men of the elders of Israel, who you know to be the elders of the people and officers over them. Bring them to the tabernacle of meeting, that they may stand there with you. Then I will come down and talk with you there. I will take of the Spirit that is upon you, and will put the same upon them, and they shall bear the burden of the people with you, that you may not bear it yourself alone. Now, God is setting up the leadership apparatus of the children of Israel when they were wandering the wilderness, because Moses was trying to take care of all these problems, all these adjudications that people were bringing to him, these issues, that someone had to decide the issue, and it was literally killing him. And his father-in-law Jethro said, you can't do this by yourself, you need help. and he talked, and Moses went in prayer to God, and then God straightened Moses out and said, this is what you're going to do. And so we see here, this is where Moses is actually setting up the sort of like the government of the children of Israel while they're wandering in the wilderness. Okay, today's quote meal. It's a Portuguese proverb. To love God is the greatest of virtues. To be loved by God is the greatest of blessings. I like that one. I really, really do like that one. And today's short Bible lesson actually comes from Al Shannon over at Biblical Proof, WordPress.com. He posted this on February 7th. Lessons from Peter's denial. Now, this is a good article, and that's actually a good Bible study in the New Testament talking about Peter's denial and what that all entailed, and how Jesus dealt with that denial before he ascended back into heaven. And I think it's a very good read. And I think if you try to understand it completely, you'll learn something in your daily Christian walk with God. Now, this bothers me. This first issue here bothers me. It really, really does, because it's one of those things where the Trump administration, where President Trump, I don't think's really thought things through. I really don't think he's thought these things through, and I think he really needs to sit down and talk to his to folks, including the NRA. Don't let the gun grabbers out there deter people from talking to the NRA. Okay, because this, I'm just setting a couple things up here that I forgot to get set up before the show. This is one of the things here is, and this is where the students, and I think this is where they're in error, and I actually think they need to come out and do a public apology to the NRA and the Republicans, saying that they have blood on their hands. I've had way too many people try to tell me that, and this is strange, because this is something that's searchable, this is something that's knowable and understandable, that the NRA does not sell guns. I've seen so many arguments about why is the NRA selling guns? You know, they're responsible for this, and the NRA does not sell guns. They absolutely do not, and you can't prove anywhere where they sell guns. And the only thing some guy came back and told me was, well, they promote the sale of guns. Okay, they promote the sale of guns, but that doesn't mean that they actually go out and sell these guns. And again, this is something that really sticks in my craw about this issue about them. Well, they promote the sale of guns. They allow gun manufacturers to advertise with them and get a lot of money from that, and they do. But the gun manufacturers, now I know not every person that buys a gun is a member of the NRA. I'm not a member of the NRA. I do support them and their organization to exist, and that's fine, but I'm not a member. I used to be, but I'm not anymore. And I'm not going to get into reasons why I'm not. I'm just not. But people who buy guns, there's 5 million members of the NRA, and that's a National Rifle Association. They promote the protection of the Second Amendment, and therefore it stands to reason that their 5 million members, probably most of them, if not all, but the vast overwhelming majority of them buy guns. And this is the way advertising works. If their members didn't buy the guns, then these gun manufacturers would probably pull back on their advertising dollars from the NRA, because that was not an effective avenue for them. So the gun manufacturers, in order for them to have money to advertise, they need to sell the guns and have revenues off of gun sales. And again, I can't stress this enough. What happened in all these mass shooting situations is not a gun problem. Yes, a gun was used, but that's not the problem. A gun does not kill people by itself indiscriminately. You need somebody behind it. You need an operator behind it. And I was talking to my wife this morning. I was watching on One American News Network where and I don't know, I can't remember his name, but the attempted assassination of Teddy Roosevelt. This guy was a schizophrenic. And I looked over at my wife, I said, do you see a pattern here? He says, a lot of these shooters are all have a mental issue. They all have a mental issue. And it just amazes. And so the NRA is not responsible. The gun manufacturers are not responsible. Republicans in Congress are not responsible. But there is some responsibility and culpability of the FBI. We found out more about not only just over a 3-year period of 36 times that the shoot Marjorie Stoneman High School was in contact with either law officials or people that could have diagnosed him as, hey, this person is really needing some help. And again, I said last week, you got to look at the county that they're living in. Broward County is the most liberal county in Florida. There has been pictures emerging online where Sheriff Scott Israel was photographed with Hillary, I think Bill Clinton. You name the national Democrat icon, and he probably has a picture with him. The guy is very narcissistic. He had his picture put on the paint job. I don't know how they actually do it, but his photo was on the side of the cruise, something about 4 of the cruisers. So this sheriff is very narcissistic. We found out this week, I was watching the Ben Shapiro show. Since 2008, he was in contact with either law enforcement, children and youth, or the school nurse or whatever, counselor, some 45 times. So now we're seeing it was 45 times something like this could have been stopped. 2 times with the FBI. Matter of fact, Laura Ingraham, on her show, she brought out some information about I can't remember who she was talking to, but it was a gun grabber she was talking to, and she said that he violated Florida statute about 3 different times, that the statutes he violated were felonies about posting things. And so there was so many times this monster could have been stopped, and he wasn't. Now, this article that I'm going to talk about, and I have a video that goes along with it, this is by Brett Samuels over at The Hill. Trump, take the guns first and go through due process second. I know here in Pennsylvania, because I had a married buddy of mine that went through this. Him and his wife were having some problems. He was getting upset at his wife. There was some physical abuse. She got a protective order against him. And because she swore out that protective order against him, the sheriff came to the house to get all the firearms out of the house. Because in Pennsylvania, they're allowed to do that. And I think that's okay. But it wasn't a permanent confiscation. It was only while the protective order was in place. And I know this because I had one of his rifles I used to harvest my first deer with. And I had to run it down to the sheriff's office and turn it into him because that was the last weapon he owned that needed to be turned in. I couldn't keep it. And I said, "Oh, that's okay." I told him, I can keep it locked up in my gun cabinet. He goes, "No, we have to have it under our control." I said, "Fine, I'll run it down." So I ran it down. I asked him, I was talking to the sheriff about that. And now sheriffs in Pennsylvania aren't like sheriffs in other states. A sheriff in Pennsylvania, a county sheriff, is an officer of the court. They don't go out and patrol in cruisers and all that kind of stuff. They're an officer of the court. Think of them sort of like a glorified bailiff that can leave the building with authority. But anyway, I was talking to him, and he said Pennsylvania has it on the books. And I said, okay, that's good. But I was concerned about it. I said, now how long can you keep them? He said, we can only keep them as long as the protective order is in effect. And I asked him, I said, well, how long does it take to get a protective order? And I didn't even know we were going to have this discussion today. I was just asking some questions. And he says, "Oh," I said, "anybody can go down to the courthouse and swear and swear out and get an order of protection, and they can get that within a few hours. It doesn't take long. You don't have to go before a judge or anything, and you can get this order sworn out. And then, then the wheels of justice get rolling. If there's any firearms, especially if it's for violence or something like that, if there's any firearms involved, that they can confiscate them. They give them a receipt of all the firearms, because I got a receipt for the one I turned in, and I gave it to my buddy. And he said they can do that. Once that's happened, the authorities are notified. The sheriff went over, got the guns, because he is an officer of the court. He was carrying out a warrant by the court, and he said all that process is real easy. And getting the protection order taken off, you got to go to court and prove certain things. And he went through all the process. So when I talk about when Trump said take guns first and go through due process second, there are state laws already on the books, and I was trying to look up, and state laws are kind of tricky to look up. I was trying to look up Florida state law about this, and I'm going to check with an acquaintance of mine, Chris Ann Hall, about this and see what she has to say. I'm going to search her podcast and see if she said anything about this. If not, I'm going to send her a direct message and see if she can shed some light on that, because she lives in Florida, was a DA and everything down in Florida. But some people call them red flag laws, and but that's not exactly what they're called. But anyway, I want to know what he means by take the guns first and go through due process. I want to make sure that if we're going to go down a path like this, I think Pennsylvania has it right. Some people might disagree with me, but I think Pennsylvania has it right when it comes to when someone swears out a protective order, that the weapons like guns should be taken out of the residence until the whole thing is situated. Or, if they're, and even if they're divorced, and he did mention this, it doesn't matter if they're living in a house or not. If I swear a protective order out against somebody else, let's say another guy, because he's just not leaving me alone or threatening my family or whatever, they can use that protective order to go and take any of the guns from his house under that protective order. But the sheriff has to go through some stuff too. He can't just, they swat a protective order, let's go get the guns. They got to take it up to a judge and get signed off on the warrants and everything in order for them to do so. And so there is a process that has to go through. But I was kind of shocked when I heard President Trump say this. So real quick here, let me get this set up here for you, and we'll play this video here real quick.
Yes, go ahead, Mike.
Well, in the category, you've spoken about it, Mr. President, gun violence restraining orders, they're called. California actually has a version of this, and I think in your meeting with governors earlier this week, individually and as a group, we spoke about states taking steps, but the focus is to literally give families and give local law enforcement additional tools if an individual is reported to be a potential danger to themselves or others. Allow due process so that no one's rights are trampled, but the ability to go to court, obtain an order, and then collect not only the firearms, but any weapons in the possession
or
of that
might
individual.
take the firearms first and then go to court, because that's another system. Because a lot of times by the time you go to court, it takes so long to go to court to get the due process procedures. I like taking the guns early, like in this crazy man's case that just took place in Florida. He had a lot of firearms. They saw everything. To go to court would have taken a long time. So you could do exactly what you're saying, but take the guns first, go through due process second.
Now, folks, like I said, I'm scared about that statement. I really am scared about that statement, because if we don't know to the extent of what he's talking about, and again, he was talking to the Vice President Pence, and I think Vice President Pence makes some sense. He said California has some laws on the books. I imagine most states have protective order type laws where they can come in and temporarily take any weapons in the household. because, you know, if you look at the stats, domestic violence is pretty high up on the list of murders with a gun. It's not the most, but it's high up there. I don't have the stat right at my fingertip. I was looking at them earlier. But again, they are up there. So this, like I said, this came from the Hill. And basically, on Wednesday, Trump voiced support for confiscating guns from certain individuals deemed to be dangerous, even if the violates due process rights. Again, I want to state this, I can't overemphasize this enough. If there's laws on the books, and I think reasonable laws on the books, for someone who has been diagnosed with not even diagnosed, there were red flags for this Marjorie Stoneman high school shooter. Too many of them. He actually violated a couple Florida state laws right there. The sheriff could have took him into custody and then confiscated any weapons that he had, you know, to keep them safe from, you know, anybody else using them. So there were red flags. I'm not in favor of, okay, we suspect somebody of something, let's just go take their firearms and then we'll worry about due process, because I think that's a very slippery slope. And you heard Donald Trump say, I like taking the guns early, like in this crazy man's case that just took place in Florida. To go to court would have taken a long time. Trump said at a meeting with lawmakers on school safety and gun violence. Now, if you put laws in place that talk about, and Florida's, I think they're one of the leaders in this, about cyber stalking or posting, you know, things on the internet, like with your guns in a menacing manner, or, you know, like shooting chickens that you're holding or something, you know, whatever it is. They said he violated at least 2 Florida statutes that the violations were felony. And to me, that's enough. Even if you couldn't hold him, and they kept saying, well, we couldn't actually hold him for a 72-hour psych eval, even though he's cutting himself up. And this is, again, this is what just bothers me about the whole system, is that he saw a counselor in school and they said, no, it's really nothing to be concerned. The guy's online. He's showing pictures of himself cutting himself in front of other people. He's cutting himself, threatening to hold guns to people's heads. That's a terroristic threat. That is illegal. That is a felony. He can be held for that. And they missed all this. The Broward County Sheriff's Office missed all this. But I think this is almost like the Overton window. This kind of argument, we need to confiscate first and then due process second, has the pendulum swinging way too far the other way. It's gone way too far the other way. We need some balance here. We need some balance. He says here, Trump was responding to comments from Vice President Pence that families and local law enforcement should have more tools to report potentially dangerous individuals with weapons. And honestly, the family he was living with, I think the best thing they could have done, the family he was living with should have went and sworn out a protective order against him, saying he's a menace to himself and to us. And that could have got the ball rolling on the whole thing, I believe. But there were so many missed opportunities with this, it wasn't even funny. It wasn't even funny. Matter of fact, it turns your stomach if you sit there and think about it. Trump met with lawmakers on Wednesday to discuss gun laws and school safety in the aftermath of February 14th shooting at a high school in Parkland, Florida, that left 17 people dead. The suspected shooter was able to legally purchase the AR-15, reportedly used in his shooting despite numerous calls to law enforcement about his unstable behavior. And anywhere along that line, anybody that he was in contact with, a relative, the people he's living with, or something like that, they could have asked for competency hearing. They could have asked for that. They could have went down and asked for that. Got the family lawyer involved to see what they can do, what rights that they have to protect themselves and to protect him from himself. Again, I seem to be piling on. But the more I read into this, the more that it just doesn't make sense to me. It really doesn't. So Again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but we may have to. Oh, man. Now, I wish sometimes Donald Trump would think before he acts or before he speaks. I think that's the biggest part of his problem. This was posted on today. White House walks back Trump support for universal gun checks by Jordan Fabian over at thehill.com. Press Secretary Sanders said Trump supports not necessarily universal background checks, but certainly improving the background check system. He wants to see what that legislation, the final piece of it, looks like. She told reporters at the White House, universal means something different to a lot of people. He certainly wants to focus on improve on the background check system. Comments came after Trump stunned many in Washington by voicing support for many gun control proposals during a meeting with lawmakers that aired live on television. And so he goes in, he talks, he says, Democrats were saying Americans want universal background checks, which means if I sell my pistol to my brother, that I have to go to a firearms dealer and have the background checks done. I'm not going to sell my pistol to my brother if I think he's mentally unstable, because that would bring a lot of guilt on me if something happened. You know, but again, universal means a lot of different things, different people. He says, you have a different president now, Trump told the senator. You went through a lot of presidents and you didn't get it done. You have a different president. I think maybe you have a different attitude too. I think people want to get it done. The president has previously supported a more modest proposal written by Murphy and Senate Majority Whip John Cornyn. John Cornyn feels pressure on guns, campaign websites. That's links to everything. And he's a Republican, Texas. Designed to bolster the existing background check system, but not expand it. And this is one of the problems. There are so many holes in the background check system that we have in place now that should be tightened up first. Let's get up. Let's add another string in the net, another rope in the net when it comes to mental illnesses. And let's get that in place. And let's make the states, honestly, if the states aren't, and I shared with you last Friday, where it's like 28% of the states are only sharing about 80%, if that, of the criminal convictions in their states. Or is it the other way around? They're not sharing 80%. I think they're not sharing 80% of the state felonies that people are committing. And that's not right either. The Sutherland Springs shooter was able to purchase a firearm legally because the Air Force they failed in reporting his domestic violence conviction while he was in the Air Force. And if that would have been put on the national background check, he would not have been able to buy that gun legally. Now, could he have still went out and bought that gun? Absolutely. There's nefarious people out there that would have sold him that gun without a background check. I'm sorry to tell the SJTs out there, but that happens all the time. She said the president promised the NRA only that he'll continue to support the Second Amendment. Trump tweeted Thursday that he had a great meeting in the Oval Office tonight with the NRA. And so again, we see the president trying to get things right, trying to do a good job in getting these things right. Scary, yes, because again, sometimes I wonder about his terminology. What does he mean by due process second? Because that would be a violation of our Bill of Rights, of the Fourth Amendment, due process. And do I think that we can reasonably hold somebody for 48 to 72 hours for a mental checkup? Yeah. Yeah. But again, we're only dealing, guns is a symptom. Taking your frustrations out on innocent school children is a symptom. Cutting yourself is a symptom. All your deranged behavior All your deranged behavior is just a symptom. And you can't cure something by just dealing with the symptoms. You got to get at the root problem. And I've been actually studying on that. There's been books and reports put out about how a lot of these shooters come from single parent households and the dad is absent and been absent, almost all their life. There's another correlation with psychotic drugs. I've read reports where almost every shooter from the Texas shooter in the Texas A&M in the clock tower, all the way, and like I said this morning, I just learned about the guy Teddy Roosevelt was schizophrenic, mental issue. Again, today, medicines can help take care of that, but only to a certain extent if the people will take the medicines. We keep dealing with symptoms, which this is. Background checks is just dealing with a symptom. Do we need to tighten them up? Yes. Do we need to expand them? I don't think if we enforce the laws we have on the books now, tweak it a little bit, add the mental health issues to it. And I keep hearing the word, and I think this is very, very important, adjudicated. I don't think somebody should be able to just come out and say that somebody's crazy and they need to be, everything needs to be taken away from them. I think that needs to be proven and adjudicated. We're talking about a person's rights here. We're talking about, especially an American citizen, we're talking about their rights here. And we shouldn't take those lightly, and we should not take them away lightly. We should not take them away lightly. Now, I watched most of this White House meeting. I have this article by Joel B. Pollock posted yesterday over at Breitbart, and it says, why didn't Republicans stand up for Second Amendment, or I should say the Second Amendment, at the White House meeting, or at White House meeting? And this is a very good question I think we need to ask. Because there wasn't a whole lot of talk. Toomey spoke up. There was somebody else there. Scalise, I think, was there. I think he spoke up. President Trump attempted to, and I'm gonna. All right. I think you all can see that now. Attempted to backtrack on Thursday morning from the stance he took on gun policy on Wednesday at the White House. The president held a televised meeting Wednesday with members of both parties and encouraged them to pass more restrictive laws, including minimum age of 21 years old for buying a rifle. Tweeted Trump Thursday morning, respect Second Amendment. Now, let me stop the reading there. If they're going to do that, if they're going to lift the age, most states' drinking age is 21. You can't purchase a handgun unless you're 21. And now you can purchase hunting rifles, bolt action hunting rifles, pump shotgun, stuff like that when you're 18. But if they're going to add this to the restriction and put it up to 21, maybe we need to think about if they're not mature enough to handle these things, and we have to elevate the age, maybe we need to think about elevating the voting age too. Because I think the vote is more power and sway than any firearm ever could. Just my opinion. The president has been hit by criticism from conservatives who are upset that he seemed so eager to shut down House Majority Whip Steve Scalise's suggestion of passing concealed carry permit reciprocity on the one hand, and so enthusiastic about adding Democrats' gun control proposals to existing bipartisan proposals on the other. What was most lacking in Wednesday meeting was any real defense of the Second Amendment. And it was, there wasn't a lot of talk about defending the Second Amendment. Now, Representative Steve Scalise is talking about national reciprocity. And I do agree with Donald Trump on this. Donald Trump didn't say we shouldn't do this, but he said that should be a standalone. We shouldn't be involved with this because he doesn't think if we get too much involved with make a gun bill too expansive, it's likely not to pass to begin with, and we're not going to have meaningful change. And so Donald Trump is sort of going one issue, one vote here, which I agree with. I think it should be a standalone, but they need to talk about it. I think national reciprocity actually enhances our rights that are guaranteed and protected by the Second Amendment. Senator Pat Toomey, Republican PA, came closest when he pushed back against Trump's rebuke for not raising the minimum age in his bill with Senator Joe Manchin, Democrat West Virginia, to expand background checks. After Trump accused Toomey and Manchin of being afraid of the NRA, Toomey explained, "My reservation about it, frankly, is that the vast majority of 18 to 19 and 20-year-olds in Pennsylvania who have a rifle or a shotgun, they're not a threat to anyone. They're law-abiding citizens. They have that because they want to use it for hunting or target shooting, and to deny them their Second Amendment rights is not going to make anyone safer." And he's absolutely correct. And this is the whole gun grabber, gun control case coming out of the school shooting. We'll forget about the Sutherland Springs, which was more deadly, but that was at a church. You know, that's not as big a deal as shooting kids at a school. Well, I don't think there's any difference. Life was lost. A scumbag took it that shouldn't have had a gun to begin with. Okay? But neither Toomey nor anyone else explained the substance of that right. In a freewheeling debate where the president seemed open to listening to all points of view, Democrats were not shy about promoting their view that gun ownership was the fundamental problem for school safety, while the Republicans present failed to make the case for the Second Amendment as the foundation of liberty. The whole discussion took place in a problem-solving mode where it was taken for granted that the government had to do something in response to the shooting in Parkland, Florida, even though arguably it was the government's failure to do something that allowed the shooting to take place or that allowed it to continue as long as it did once it had begun. No one, not even Republicans, made the case that until law enforcement can do its job, we should not infringe on one of the most fundamental freedoms of. And again, I totally agree with them. I think they're absolutely right. I think Breitbart here is right. I think Joel B. Pollack is right in what he said in here about Republicans really didn't stand up for the Second Amendment. And I look at that as again, I don't even think our representatives have a full grasp of what the Constitution is, what it was written for, what the Bill of Rights are, and how the Bill of Rights is not a grant of our rights. The Bill of Rights are a protection of our rights that we already had before the federal government was ever formed. They don't understand that. I've come across too many Republicans that have the same idea. They just don't voice it in the same way, or they're very hushed tones about it. The same idea as Democrats have, that the Constitution is antiquated, outdated, should be left alone and let us govern you. When that's not the case at all. I think the Constitution is more relevant today than ever because of an overreaching government, because of the fears of our founding fathers and the framers of the Constitution of the government becoming tyrannical and stomping on people's rights. And this is a slippery slope we're on when all we talk about is the guns. That is only a symptom. It's not the problem. It's a symptom of a huger problem, a bigger problem. That's what needs to be discussed, and that's not what's being discussed. And Republicans should have pushed back against the president and defended the Second Amendment, which protects one of our fundamental rights as human beings. And they didn't. Now, the next article, it goes along with this, almost the same theme, and I don't want to seem like I'm beating up on the president, but this is an article over Breitbart by Pam Kay, posted yesterday. Tucker Carlson, Trump betraying promises on guns. Imagine if Obama had said take guns first. Well, I don't have to imagine. I'm pretty much have a clear picture in my mind what would have happened. The right, the Republicans would have been beside themselves. They would have been outside of themselves. They would have had an out-of-body experience with themselves if President Obama had said the same thing. Thursday on Fox News Channel, Tucker Carlson tonight, host Tucker Carlson said that President Donald Trump was betraying core campaign promises on guns when he said on Wednesday to take guns first, go through due process at the White House meeting with a bipartisan group of lawmakers. The shortcomings of the administration are clear. They are usually worth it, though, for two reasons. First, the ideas the president ran on are basically right. America First ought to be the principle of every administration. By definition, it's an American administration. America should be first, but that's not the motto of most administrations, not even hardly. Second, the alternatives to what we have now are scary and getting scarier. The Democrat Party is completely irresponsible and increasingly anti-American. They prefer illegal aliens to our middle class. It's true and terrifying. Somebody needs to defend the country from these people. Trump mostly does that. For these reasons, supporters have stuck with him no matter what has happened. And a lot has happened, but there is a limit to the toleration. They will not tolerate, and they shouldn't have to tolerate, by the way, betrayal on the core promises of this campaign. It seems to be happening on guns. Unfortunately, a few days ago, the president called for raising the minimum age for buying a gun to 21. By the way, that's 4 years after we let people join the military. They can join at 17, but he is saying you can't buy a gun until you're 21. Nobody's even arguing this will save actual lives because there's no research that it will. It's propaganda and sneaky propaganda. By the way, incremental steps towards more gun restrictions, that's all it is. The president went further than that, met with lawmakers to talk gun control at the White House. At that meeting, he went after Republicans who wanted to defend the Second Amendment, suggesting they are puppets of the. At one point, the president said the government should, quote, take the guns first, go through due process second. Now, I mean, how honest do you want to be? Imagine if Barack Obama had said that. Just ignore due process and start confiscating guns. Obama would have been denounced as a dictator. We would have denounced him first. Trust me. Congress would be talking impeachment. Some would be muttering success. The media agreed. They underplayed it and suggested a battle between the president and the NRA. It's not about the NRA. It's not even about the president. It's about the Constitution, and the Constitution remains the same no matter who's in power. That's the point of the Constitution. And that's where we're at today when it comes to the Constitution. We have people that want to brush the Constitution aside because it doesn't fit their narrative. It doesn't fit into what they want. It doesn't fit into how they want things governed or how they want to get things done. And again, I'm sorry if you feel that way, but I don't really care about your feelings. We are not a nation of men. We're not a nation of feelings. We are a nation of laws. Matter of fact, some of the most restrictive laws we have as a country are placed upon the federal government via, however you want to, through the Constitution. Some of the most restrictive. And one of the biggest problems I see, and this is a problem that we have down in Broward County, because all the people that had contact or were in contact with this monster, the Parkland, Florida school shooter, were government employees. They were employed by the government, whether it was federal, state, or local. But the local government, I think, bears the most responsibility, and they failed. The government failed. And I have to laugh. I do laugh at people who continue to put their faith in the government, that they're going to fix all this stuff. They're going to fix the infrastructure. We just let them spend the money. They're going to fix this. They're going to fix that. And time again, the government has proven that they can't fix these things. They don't even come close to trying to fix these things. Matter of fact, they end up making things worse. And again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but there's some out there that are saying that this was all a plan. It was the plan. And if it was, there's some monsters in government too. If this was the plan to actually have this young man shoot up a school and not get him the help he needed before this happened, that's insidious. But I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I just put that out. That's what some people are thinking. I honestly don't think that that's the case. Sorry, folks. I got a scratch in my back. He's at my desk. Because I can't reach my back anymore. And so there's these different theories out there. But what I'm saying is the government failed. And that's another symptom. That's not the problem. It's a symptom. And again, when I became diabetic, the doctor didn't just go after the symptoms of diabetes. The symptoms pointing back to diabetes, saying, I've had these symptoms. Let's do a blood sugar level test, H1 or HC1 or H1C level. They did a stick test on my finger, the whole 9 yards, and all the symptoms pointed back to type 2 diabetes. And eventually, the other tests I had taken confirmed that I had developed type 2 diabetes. But if the doctor would have only dealt with the symptoms and not the root cause, what good would that have done me? Again, heart attacks. Heart attacks have symptoms. Breathing, your COP folks, they have symptoms. If they only take care of the symptoms and not try to address the root problem, they'll never cure it. They'll never help the person, who has that breathing issue or has heart issues or has type 2 diabetes. And again, I cannot stress this enough, that you just cannot deal with the symptoms and hope the problem will correct itself or go away. It's not going to happen. If we do nothing now, there will be another mass shooting. Whether it's at a school or church, there will be another mass shooting if we do not go back and try to discover what the problem is. What is making these young men want to do what they're doing? Want to carry out the evil acts that they carry out, whether it's at a school or whether it's at a hotel in Las Vegas or whether it's at a church in South Carolina or in Texas. Something makes these young men do this. There's people have been talking about the fatherless issue. People have been talking about psychotropic drug issues. Matter of fact, I got a discussion yesterday talking about bullying. Now, my day, and I'm not bragging on myself, I was never a bully. I hated bullies. I really did. I didn't like them for living. Because, somebody picking on somebody that's weaker that can't defend themselves, or or a couple bullies ganging up on somebody, that's just wrong on so many levels. I'm sorry. And not only didn't I tolerate bullies who bullied me, I stood up to them. I got beat up a couple times, but I still stood up to them. I would not back down. And eventually they left me alone. I wasn't fun. They couldn't get their jollies out of me by beating me up, because I'd get back up off the ground. I was ready to fight again. And they just looked at me, especially the ones that ganged up on me. The one-on-one bullies usually didn't get the best of me. Not every time that I win, but they didn't usually get the best of me. And if I was in a room or in a situation where I seen somebody bullying somebody else, I'd never let that go by. And that's how we used to deal with it when I was in school. They got we used to open up a can of whoop butt, as it was said, and we were talking about that. And my cousin from Ohio remembers stuff like that. I used to get in trouble because I used to defend people with bullies. Now, fighting was not tolerated in the school even back then. And no matter, even if I told him, and I did, I says he was picking on my buddy Dennis Lease, and I shouldn't have said his whole name there. I'm sorry. My buddy Denny, and he wouldn't let him go. And I warned him. I gave him a couple warnings, and I'm only going to give you a couple of them because he didn't hear me the first 2 times. Third time ain't going to help. And I commenced a whooping on him. And neither one of us won, but he didn't pick on Denny anymore. I had to go get my braces cleaned out, and that's a whole other story. So it was different back then. But bullying is a big issue. And why in the world do classmates tolerate a bully? I'll never understand that. I was watching a video last night. This brat was told to sit down, and it was looks like a science class, told by the teacher to go take a seat, and he got in the teacher's face, "Who do you think you are to be bossing me around, yada, yada, yada." And my first thoughts were, where's his parents? What parent in their right mind would allow their child to get away with something like this? And yet he was acting out in class like that. He eventually left the classroom and had to go down to the principal's office. And I was like, that would have never, when I was going to school, in junior high school, that had never flown. That would have, somebody getting in a teacher's face like that, because there would have been a couple of guys on him and backing him down, putting him out in the hallway, getting him away from the teacher. Because if the teacher retaliated, the teacher would lose her job. I think that's what he was trying to do. And I told my cousin was on that feed, and somebody else was on the feed too. And I said, that teacher showed a lot of restraint, and he really did. And I said, I don't think I had that type of restraint. That guy got in my face like he did. I said, he'd be waking up when his haircut came back in style. And she came back with a response. She was drinking Mountain Dew, and she said she snorted while she was drinking her Mountain Dew when she read that comment. You know, because I don't think I have that kind of restraint. I don't have any patience for that. I've tried over the years to have more patience for that, but that's one of those things that I don't think anybody should have patience for, bullies. And that's another problem we have in schools. You know, I'm not saying this monster down in, I keep calling him a monster, he is a human being, but this school shooter down in Parkland, Texas, there's been reports that he was being bullied in school and that, picked on stuff. And that, again, that shouldn't be. That should never be. Where are the Dan Clemenses down there in Marjorie Stoneman? Where are they? They're going to put their necks on the line to protect somebody from bullying. And who knows? I'm spitballing here. Who knows? If someone would have stepped up, picked on, if somebody would have stepped up, befriended him, and defended him against those bullies, who knows what that would have done to his mental state? Who knows? Or any of these other kids that became school shooters if they were bullied on. Who knows what would have happened if someone would have stepped up, another classmate or two, defended them? Would that have made a difference? I'm not sitting here saying definitively it would, but we'll never know. And bullying, they say bullying accounts for about 4,400 or 6,400, I forget the number. It's in the thousands, multiple thousands of deaths each year, suicide. Bullying. And honestly, I think if a case can be proven for bullying, and Florida does have some cyber stalking and cyber bullying laws on the books, if a case can be proven that you were bullying somebody, even if it was verbal bullying, you need to be held accountable. Because even some of my libertarian friends are like, well, that's free speech, we're going to watch it out here. Folks, that's aggression on somebody else. You know, either you're for the non-aggression principle or you aren't. But even verbal bullying is crossing a line. It really is. So again, I don't want to belabor this. I'm going to get on to the next issue here, and I'm going long a little over the hour now. But there are so many things that happened and so many things that slipped through the crack with this young man to get him to the point where he was at, that if somebody would have stepped out earlier, this tragedy may not have happened, period. Well, final thing I want to talk about, this came out, I was on Breitbart, never even thought about talking about this day, but just I like to leave it on a little bit different note than the rest of the show here. I have a report here by far left Southern Poverty Law Center helping YouTube police videos as conservatives increasingly censored, by Charlie Nash, posted yesterday, March 1st, over at Breitbart. This is something that's happening. This has been confirmed. I mean, this isn't something, this is not a conspiracy theory. This is something that's actually going on, and it's been confirmed. A report claims that the far left Southern Poverty Law Center is assisting Google with the policing of content on its YouTube platform while conservatives face increased censorship. According to the Daily Caller, the SPLC is one of more than 100 non-government organizations and government agencies in YouTube's Trusted Flaggers program. A source with knowledge of the arrangement told the Daily Caller. The SPLC and other program members help police YouTube for extremist content ranging from so-called hate speech to terrorist recruiting videos. The Daily Caller explained all the groups in the program have confidentiality agreements. A spokesman for Google YouTube parent company previously told the Daily Caller. A handful of YouTubers, Trusted Flaggers, including Anti-Defamation League and No Hate Speech, a European organization focused on combating intolerance, has gone public with their participation in the program. The vast majority of the program have remained hidden behind their confidentiality agreements. The report was also picked up by Fox News. The SPLC, which has been funded by companies as large as Apple, lists anti-extremist Muslim reformer such as Majid Nawaz on their hate database, and recently even claimed factual feminist commentator Christina Hoff Sommers legitimizes male supremacy. On December 21st, the SPLC Christmas, Merry Christmas, and Jesus as extremist trends on their hate tracker, while in June, the SPLC acknowledged that several mass shooters had been fans of their organization. Google has recently increased its purge of conservative and libertarian accounts, including hiding videos of Antifa making violent threats, disabling the accounts of popular classical liberal Sargon of Akkad, and issuing sanctions and strikes to both InfoWars and conservative student Ashton Whitty for their commentary on the Parkland shooting. There's an update. InfoWars contributor Jerome Corsi reports that his YouTube account has been terminated. Full disclosure, I only ever met on a podcast, just briefly talking to him, Jerome Corsi, and I thought he was a jerk. I don't normally personally attack people, but I thought he was acting like a jerk because of my stance on the Constitution. He was supposedly a member of the Constitution Party. I don't think that's the case anymore because I haven't seen him come up in any of the conversations, although I could be mistaken. But I don't trust anything the man says. I mean, the way I was treated by him, instead of him being like a mentor and trying to instruct me if he thought I was wrong, he talked down to me, he berated me, and I'm like, sorry, I don't need this. I don't know who you are, don't know you personally. I've read some of your work. I think he's too conspiratorial for my liking. And ever since then, I really haven't given him the time of day. I don't read any of his stuff anymore. I barely acknowledge his existence. And I know he's heavy over in InfoWars now, so I think he's went the full way over to conspiracy theory. But it's not a conspiracy theory, and I've been told this by folks on the left about the SPLC, Southern Poverty Law Center. They have named the Constitution Party as an extremist hate group because we teach Constitution and constitutional history. We teach about American history. How dare we? We teach American history. Therefore, we are haters. We are a hate group because we teach American history. My friends, and I want to say this publicly, I've said it in comments on Twitter, and if I get in trouble, I get in trouble. I don't care. The SPLC is the biggest hate agitating group in the country. If you are on their list, or if anybody out there that looks at this list and reads this list and actually uses it to determine if somebody's a hate group, I don't know what to say to you. I really don't. I don't think there's any help for you. I don't think you've done your research enough. There are, like I said, there are groups on there that are James Dobson group, the Family Life Center, or whatever it's called. They're on the list as haters. My Christian stance as a member of the Church of Christ, I'm a hater, according to SPLC. Again, I believe, and I'll state this for the record, the SPLC is the biggest hate group in the country and the biggest fomenter of hate in this country. And for Google, I don't know why Republicans or conservatives, libertarians aren't pushing harder back against Google on this. Why are you using a group like the SPLC? The most bigoted group in the country, the most hate-filled, hate-agitating group that there can be. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know why they're not doing that. I don't know why that they're not taking care of that. I really, again, it's amazing to me. It really is amazing to me on this. All right, folks, let me see if this will play without too much. All righty, we got it in there. Well, folks, that's the end of the show. Like I said, I wanted to sort of leave it on that. about the video and everything like that. So about the SPLC, I think it's something we need to be mindful of. And I know I'm getting a little echo there, and I apologize for that. That we need to be mindful of, and we need to keep track of, especially if you're on YouTube, especially if you're like me. I'd love to make a living on YouTube someday, but it seems to be getting harder and harder for conservatives. It really is. All right, folks, I'm going to be trying better next week. I had a lot of issues the past 2 weeks. I'm going to try better next week to get more videos out every day. Hold me to it. Hold me to it. Go over to my contact page at thedanclemenshow.com, see the show notes page for episode 972, and send me a letter saying, Dan, where's my videos? Where are they? This has been the Dan Clemens Show. I'm your host, Dan Clemens, your constitutional warrior, fighting for your right just to be an American. Have a great rest of the day, and God bless, and we'll see you at the next video.